When it died, they packed the body in salt and carried it across the desert to an emperor so he could examine it with his own hands. That was the 4th century, but the same creature had already been described, down to the shape of its nose and the split in its hooves, by people who lived thousands of years apart and never once met. 3 empires examined the evidence. None of them wrote down what they concluded. The description almost never drifts. A man's torso and the legs of a goat, horns rising from the forehead, a flat hooked nose, ears drawn to points. It lived in the places people didn't: desert, mountain, the far edge of the forest. Fast, strong, and able to speak, or to make sounds close enough to speech, that interpreters were brought in to try. Every tradition that recorded it landed on the same essentials. It was mortal, it was old, and it was not human, though it wasn't entirely unlike one. The Greeks gave it the name we still use. They called it a satyr, but the record they inherited was already ancient, and it stretched across continents that had no way of talking to each other. Myth doesn't usually behave like this. Myth drifts. This didn't. I'm not here to tell you what these people saw. I don't know. What I can tell you is that they kept seeing the same thing in places that shared nothing else. If that's the kind of question you sit with, stay with me. Because the satyr has a name in almost every tradition older than the one we know it by. The oldest images come from Minoan Crete. Frescoes from around 1500 BCE show goat-legged figures in ritual settings, painted centuries before there was a Greek world to name them. Move east into the Hebrew scriptures and you find the Seirim. English Bibles usually soften the word to goat demons, but in Isaiah and Leviticus, they aren't a figure of speech. They're described as real inhabitants of desolate places, encountered in ruins, receiving sacrifices they weren't supposed to. When Jerome translated the Old Testament into Latin, he rendered Seirim simply as satyrs, no hedging. He understood them as the same creature under a different name. Keep going. Across Mesopotamia, the goat-human figure appears in sacred contexts as far back as the Neo-Sumerian period, with defined traits and a fixed religious role. And far to the northwest, in Irish, Scottish, and Manx folklore, goat human beings persist with no traceable Mediterranean influence at all, no obvious way for the story to have traveled there. The classicist Martin Litchfield West looked at this spread and argued that the Greek satyr and its relatives across the Indo-European world likely share a single origin, one that predates every culture that eventually wrote it down, which raises a quiet, uncomfortable question. If they all inherited the same creature from something older, what was the thing they inherited it from? That's the pattern. Now, the specific encounters, tied to named people, at moments you can put a date on. In the 4th century, Jerome, one of the most careful scholars of his age, was writing the life of a desert hermit when he stopped to record something that hermit, Anthony, ran into on the road through Syria. In a rocky valley, he met a creature, hooked nose, horned forehead, the feet of a goat. It offered him fruit. It spoke, calling itself mortal, one of a kind the desert peoples had always known. Jerome could feel the doubt coming, so he did something a myth teller doesn't usually bother to do. He anchored it. "Don't dismiss this," he wrote, "because during the reign of Constantine, a creature of exactly this kind was brought alive to Alexandria and put on public display. When it died, the body was preserved in salt and carried to Antioch so the emperor himself could examine it. The whole world," Jerome wrote, "was a witness." Sit with the specifics for a second. A named emperor, a named city, a body, salted and transported because a corpse is the kind of thing you can set in front of a ruler and ask him to look at. This isn't a story told around a fire. It's written like a claim someone expected to be checked. And Jerome was not in the business of writing down things he thought was nonsense. He also wasn't the only one who put it on the record. Once, a Roman army caught one asleep. The account comes from Plutarch in his Life of Sulla. Sulla's men were marching through Greece toward the coast at Apollonia when they came across a creature sleeping near a sacred precinct. They took it, they brought it before the general, and they tried to question it through several interpreters, one after another, because no one could place the sounds it made. Plutarch describes the noise as something between the neigh of a horse and the bleat of a goat. Sulla listened, was disturbed by what he saw, and ordered it taken out of his sight. What matters here is where Plutarch puts this. Not in a collection of legends, not in a book of marvels meant to entertain. He sets it inside a serious biography, alongside named battles, troop movements, and the political maneuvering of a Roman general. He records it the way he records everything else, as a thing that happened on the march. That's the detail that's hard to file away. A commander pausing a campaign to interrogate a captured creature, bringing in interpreter after interpreter, is not how people wrote about things they considered impossible. It's how they wrote about the unfamiliar but real, and it wasn't treated as a private curiosity. Once at least, the death of one of these creatures became a matter for the emperor himself. This one Plutarch also recorded, and it's the strangest of them. It happened during the reign of Tiberius. A ship was passing the island of Paxi when a voice carried across the open water, loud, clear, calling out to a man aboard by name. The man was Thamus, an Egyptian pilot. The voice told him that when he reached a certain point, he should announce that Great Pan was dead. Thamus waited, and when the ship drew level with the place, he called the message out across the water, exactly as instructed. What came back was not silence. From the shore rose a sound of mourning, not one voice, but many, all at once, a lamentation from something unseen. Plutarch names the witnesses. The passengers were recorded, and this didn't stay a sailor's tale. When it reached Rome, Tiberius summoned Thamus in person and ordered the matter officially investigated. Think about the shape of that. The most powerful man in the world hears that one of these creatures has died, and instead of laughing it off, he opens an inquiry. Whatever Pan was to the people of that empire, his death was serious enough to reach the throne, and serious enough to investigate. They were not mourning a metaphor. So, how does a creature this well documented become a punchline? You can watch it happen in stages. First came ridicule, the satyr play, a crude comic act at Athenian festivals that turned the creature into a stock joke. Then, Augustine of Hippo placed Pan and the satyrs among the demons, and given how the old sources described their violence in the wilds, the category wasn't baseless. It just moved the creature out of the natural world and into the supernatural one. Then, by 1551, the scholar Conrad Gessner offered the tidy version. The whole record was just misidentified apes. That's one reading. 3 centuries of relabeling, each step quietly explaining the creature away. The other reading is simpler and harder to shake. That something real was slowly processed out of the record, one reclassification at a time, until there was nothing left to point at. This is what I keep coming back to. The explanations have never settled. Myth, then demon, then ape. The story we tell about the satyr has changed in every century that tried to tell it. But the thing being explained never changed at all. Same creature, same details, named witnesses, salted bodies, imperial inquiries, across 4,000 years of people who had no way to compare notes. So the real question was never whether they believed it, it's what they were all looking at. I want to know where you land on this. Myth, mistake, or memory? Tell me in the comments, I read them. And if the idea of a wild, half-human thing seen again and again by people who never met stays with you, then you already know the record didn't end in the ancient world. It just changed names one more time.